Hello, my name is Paul List. We're about to watch more of my reaction from Diary of the CEO with a panel that discussed the advent of AI and its impact on humanity. So I invite you to like and subscribe and to purchase my book at readmountdoom.com. And without further ado, let's go to the reaction.
When I look out at society, I go, okay, it's having a negative impact. When I look at individual use cases, it's having a profoundly positive impact, including for me, it's having a very positive impact. So it's one of these things where I wonder, what is that we need to teach people at school so that they understand the world that we're going into? Because one of the biggest issues that we're having is that we're sending kids to school with this blueprint, this template that they're going to have this long arc career that no longer exists, that essentially we're treating them like learning LLMs. And we're saying, okay, we're going to prompt you. You're going to give us the right answer. You're going to hallucinate it if possible. And, and then we go, okay, now go off into the world. And they go, oh, but wait a second. I don't know how money works. I don't know how society works. I don't know how my brain works. I don't know how I'm meant to handle this novelty problem. I'm not sure how to approach someone in a social situation and ask if they want to go on a date. So all the important things that actually are the important milestones that people want to be able to hit and that technology can actually have an impact on, we get no user manual. So I think one of the biggest things that has to happen is we have to equip young people all through school to actually prepare them for the world that's coming or the world that's here.
Wow, all of his milestones were so materialistic. It's about career. It's all according to the industrial age, and what went side by side with that over a period of time. Education fell away from metaphysics, true understanding of causes, you might say from art to craft, and now it's not even craft anymore. This guy, all of his milestones were so materialistic. He just described school as being industrial education, training for a job. School used to be education, but the word educate means it's educate. It means to lead out with authority. You lead out of what? You lead out of ignorance with the authority. It used to be the Catholic Church. Now it's money. Now it's power. Now it's the government. Now it's the powers behind government that are training, that have usurped public education in particular, and it's deconstructing what education is supposed to be and leading us back into the darkness where we'll worship machines, and we're already worshiping machines. This guy presents a very clear case of his understanding that and his knowledge that education is doing this, but he has no idea that it's false. He just thinks it's false because it doesn't prepare him to know about money or how to interact with, whoever, or all these other things. Education, in the truest sense, was supposed to give us the capacity to understand what it essentially means to be a human being made in the image of God with eternal purpose. And that eternal purpose is eternity with our Creator and our Savior. And no matter what we do with education, when that's left out, whatever the result is of education without that is going to lead to misery.
There's only one intervention, and this has been reproduced many times, that creates two standard deviation positive outcomes in education, meaning you're better than 99% of everyone else. And that is one-on-one tutoring.
I thought so. I was going to say smaller classrooms and personalization.
One-on-one tutoring, yeah. And by the way, if you look, someone also did a survey of all the geniuses, the Einsteins of the world, and found that they all had one-on-one tutoring. They all had someone in their lives that took interest in them and tutored them. So what can create one-on-one tutoring opportunity for every child in the world?
AI.
AI.
My kids use it, and it's incredible.
Wow. So now he thinks it's a great boon that the machine now will take over education. And that just goes to show that it's not an art anymore. Machines aren't capable of art. Art transcends the material realm. True art transcends the material realm. We've made it just self-expression now, and we call it art, and that's not art. It's self-expression. True art rises above and it becomes universal, and it transcends the material realm. Now he's got teachers. He wants AI to take over the teaching position, and all it can do is instruct. Also, I might say too, now with the added microchip, the Tower of Barad-dûr, now we'll have he's not thinking like this, but maybe he is. We'll have an immediate transmission of data from the AI to the microchip. So you have access to information almost instantaneously, and that will be that much closer to the absolute capture of the human being. That's the next, probably, I can't think of anything that would be any more of the next step to the total capture and annihilation of the human person, of that interaction between the teacher, the educator, who is not leading out with authority, who's leading into the darkness of transhumanism. That you're right on the doorstep now of that communication between the microchip that communicates through the one ring. That's the one ring is the language in the microchip, and the rings of power are the analog rings that the elves created. And those analog rings, and they're all the notes of the dominant ninth chord minus the fifth, because Tolkien knew that would be way too obvious, and also he didn't have a people to wield that other ring. So this guy here he's absolutely Boromir. This guy's Boromir.
Well, on the one hand, I agree that the closer to one you get, the better. But I also personally believe that 0 to 1 is best. And what I mean by that is part of what's gone wrong with our educational system is that it is done through abstraction, and effectively the arbiter of whether you have succeeded or failed in learning the lesson is the person at the front of the room. And that's okay if the person at the front of the room is truly insightful, and it's terrible if the person at the front of the room is lackluster, which happens a lot. So what doesn't work that way is interaction with the physical world, in which nobody has to tell you whether you've succeeded or failed. If you're faced with an engine that doesn't start, you can't argue it into starting. You have to figure out what the thing is that has caused it to fail, and then there's a great reward when you alter that thing and suddenly it fires up.
I don't necessarily disagree with him, but the failure of education started with the Reformation, when we turned away from the scholastics and turned our attention and our goal toward material wealth, long life, and pleasure, as opposed to before this. Education was supposed to prepare the human being to be a well-rounded, competent human being, cultivating virtue and preparing for our eternal. We have to look at ourselves as like seeds, and we have to cultivate those seeds so we can blossom and bloom and ultimately flower in heaven. That's gone from education, and we wonder why education has failed, because we've turned it into a mechanism.
We have squandered a long period of productivity and peace in which we could have prepared for this moment. And our narrow focus on competition has created a fragile world that I'm afraid is not going to survive the disruption that's coming. And it didn't have to be that way. This was foreseeable. I mean,
it's created a flammable world, and we've introduced the fire.
Frankly, the movie 2001, which came out the year before I was born, anticipates some of these problems. And, we treated it too much like entertainment and not enough like education.
Well, where we really missed the mark on that was Tolkien warned us, back in 1954, and we've treated that entirely too much like entertainment. And Tolkien made it very clear that his mythology was fundamentally and intentionally Catholic. Not obviously, but it's so sewn in and fundamentally, essentially part of it that you can't see it. But then he also said, as I said before, it's about the fall, mortality, and the machine. Nobody's looked at it properly until now. By God's grace, I looked at it properly, educated myself. I stepped outside of the box and decided that I didn't want a store-bought education. I wanted a scholastic education. So I studied Aristotle and Aquinas and many, many, many other things. And then Tolkien's mythology became crystal clear. So we have been warned.
You know, when Heather and I wrote our book, I wanted the first chapter to be, are the Amish right? And the answer is they can't be exactly right because they picked an arbitrary moment to step off the escalator. But are they right that there's something dangerous about this continuing pattern of technological change? Clearly they are.
What do the Amish do for anyone that doesn't know?
The Amish live as if it was, what,
1850 or something?
So they live in they don't use cars. I think they do have phones, but they do not have electricity. Basically, they voluntarily accept they're basically a Luddite community, and they have turned out to fare surprisingly well against many of the things that have upended modern
COVID,
folks.
one of them, right?
Yeah, COVID, they did beautifully.
Quite happy people.
Very low autism rates. They have all sorts of advantages. So anyway, I'm not arguing that we should live like the Amish. I don't see that. But I do think the idea that they had an insight, which was you need to step off that escalator because you're just going to keep making yourself sicker, is probably right.
I agree with him there as far as stepping off the elevator. We should have seen that a long time ago, but we're always in tights to go higher and higher on the elevator, or lower and lower into the fires of hell by the bait. And the bait is always money, power, pleasure. These are the things, these earthly things that appeal to our fallen nature. The devil is very real, and he knows our fallen nature very well, and he uses all those things that appeal to our fallen nature. And that's why true education helps us teaches us the value of cultivating virtue, so we don't fall victim to those temptations and that bait. I agree that the Amish do live in a much more natural lifestyle. However, their theology is dysfunctional. So if you've gotten this far into the video, we hope you enjoyed the video on a very important topic, and I invite you to, again, like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.